everybody. Welcome to episode 58 of Life and Life Only. We are live from Tunbridge today. It's quite a unique episode because I haven't actually done a podcast face-to-face since I think it was early 2020, just before the pandemic. Anyway, I'm here with Peter Seal, and we met about 4 years ago. I started a meetup group called Meaningful Conversations in Tunbridge, and it was a bit of a fait accompli because if you came to the meetup, you were kind of obliged to talk meaningfully, you know what I mean. Anyway, without further ado, because I've got lots and lots of notes here, having skimmed through the book we're going to base this conversation on. Peter, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yep,
yeah, still above the ground, which is positive.
Yes. Do you like to reveal your age? Only for the reason to say that you have had lots of experience of life.
Is that externally, I'm 81. Internally, I think I'm 37.
That's good.
Because 37 is young enough to be interesting, but old enough to have experience.
Yeah. Nice sweet spot there. Right, so Life and Life Only is a search for inner and outer truth. And I fully understand that probably finding the truth is maybe a fruitless task, but it's trying to find some truth in the world. And I kind of do inner and outer. So the inner tends towards self-development, obviously life coaching, which I do a bit of. And outer truth is how we receive the world, so things like media, so forth. But today is going to be mostly inner truth. So we're going to hopefully give the listeners some ideas for how to improve their lives. So the notes I made were skimming through your book, The Self-Help Delusion. There was so much in it, I take this as a compliment, so much in it that I had to stop at some point after I'd made 5 pages of notes. So it's a little bit haphazard, but I'm pretty confident there'll be plenty here that will be useful. So let's talk about your book. A bit of a perfunctory question. How long did it take to write? And how much had you already planned out before you started writing it?
Well, I didn't plan any of it. It took about active time about a year. Passive time about 5 years, because I didn't set out to write a book. I set out to try and explain the world to myself. I didn't set out thinking, I'm going to write a book. No, that wasn't the objective. But when the pages started piling up, I began to think, maybe there's a book here. So overall, probably about 5 years.
I was reading a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yes.
Good book. And he was talking about how a lot of people, when they write, they wait for inspiration and then take action.
Yes.
But he was saying that the inspiration comes during the action.
Correct.
Would you say that's broadly correct?
Absolutely. Okay. I used to go sit in the Waitrose in Crowborough, and I sat down. I hadn't the faintest idea what I was going to write. Stick it down on the page. And it practically was a page, because this is before computing. And you'll bin a half of it, but you'll have something. If you sit and wait for, the muse to strike, you can wait a long time.
There's a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Have you ever come across that?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's a really good book. And she has a couple of exercises you can do. One's called the morning pages.
Yep.
And you sit down and you handwrite and you literally do, 2 or 3 sides of A4.
Yep.
And it can literally be anything. You could write your shopping list out. You could write all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, I suppose. But the idea is that you start writing, and then obviously you would evolve from writing the shopping list to, if you want to be a writer, writing something meaningful.
Yes.
Right. Can you explain the title, The Self-Help Delusion? A Manifesto For Genuine Change, sorry.
Well, the Self-Help Delusion, that's a bit of a lead-in, because obviously it is a self-help book, but many people are not really into, I don't want to read a self-help book, I don't need to. The Self-Help Delusion gives them a sort of, I knew there was nothing in this self-help stuff anyway, let's have a look at it, let's have a read. Also, if you get past about the second page, most self-help books are set out to change your behaviour. That, for me, can work, but generally you have to change your beliefs behind the behaviour. Because if you don't change your beliefs and you don't change the way you define yourself to yourself, very difficult to change.
Yeah. I make a distinction between self-help and self-improvement. So
yes.
Self-help is, when I think of it, I think of glossy books, and they tend to have a time scale, like change your life in 14 days, whatever.
Yep.
When I think of self-development, if I think of, say, Dale Carnegie or M. Scott Peck, some of the classic ones, it's not really guaranteeing you a result. It's challenging you to think differently, which I think is what you would probably subscribe to.
Self-development, for me, it's the process. You don't know where you're going. You just know that there is more in this world that you don't understand, and you develop it. can't remember the guy's name. He said, we're not human beings, we're human becomings.
Right.
And I like to think of ourselves as we're our works in progress, if we choose to be. And that's a continuous all of your life, understanding yourself and seeing the world in a more positive way.
I think we're always conditioned to think of endpoints, aren't we?
Yes.
It seems like.
It's people, I'm going to go to Ibiza and can't wait till I get to Ibiza. I go on the trains, not to Ibiza, but...
You're not going to Ibiza this year?
No, not on the trains.
Okay.
But the thing is that the journey is probably as significant as the destination. And we tend to forget that. It's set where you want to go and then forget that you're going, just grow.
Yeah. Something we talked about in the group, it was ages ago, can you become addicted to self-help material? And I kind of made an analogy. It's a bit like having a McDonald's hamburger to stop you being hungry. It'll give you a bit of a buzz, but then you'll probably be more hungry after about an hour. So I think I've been in this trap. Have you ever been in this trap of reading this self-help, self-development material and just really enjoying reading it, but not necessarily taking action? I don't know.
Well, yes, I mean, you can... I had a friend who was bulimic, and she knew all about bulimia from a psychological and a professional and a nutritional way, but she was still bulimic. You can understand your problem all ends up, but still have the problem.
Yeah, I think self-help books, they give you this kind of fuzzy feeling as well. It's almost like, finally I'm getting the truth, but they said you have to take action. I mean, it's just saying they can be a bit addictive, you know.
Of course you have to take action. If you don't change your behaviour, your behaviour is your thought, word and deed. Things happen. We create things by thought, word and deed. When we built the Channel Tunnel, it was, God, I think we could put a tunnel under here. Okay, yes, and then we talk to other people about it and raise some money, and then we do it. All of our actions, all of our outcomes are created by thought, word and deed.
Absolutely, yeah.
And deed being the important one, because if you don't do that, the thought and the word don't get you anywhere.
Yeah, we're going to get on to NLP and also CBT later on.
Okay.
Here's a quote from your book. We behave not from our conscious thoughts, but from unconscious patterns and habits. Now, this is a bit of a general question, but where do they come from fundamentally?
We develop them over many years to keep ourselves safe.
Right.
Because, our greatest achievement is that we're still here. And, when you're a child, you learn behaviours in order to survive, in order to cope with your parents. Some of those behaviours are useful and you can maintain them all your life. Other behaviours actually are not really a good thing to be doing. Bopping your sister on the head because she annoys you may stop her annoying you, but it's not a good idea to bop people on the head.
Okay. Now, talking about approaching things the wrong way, there was someone in your book, I think it was a friend of yours, who was trying to lose weight. And I've kind of got a story about this as well, but you go first. Where was she going wrong?
Well, she succeeded in losing weight because she was with one of these dieting clubs. And she was about, I'm guessing, 16 stone, I suppose. And she lost an awful lot of weight. And then they should go on to a maintenance diet. But I don't think she actually defined herself as a thinner person. She defined herself as a fat person on a diet. And losing weight is not something you do for a period of time. It's something you do all the time. You need a behaviour to change what you eat and how you eat it. And going on a diet is great, you will lose weight. But there's a whole different process in keeping it off.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying about having endpoints, because diets tend to work in diet for a month or something.
Yes.
As you were saying, self-development is lifelong. Changing your dietary habits should be lifelong. Why is it a month or 2 months?
To be effective, it has to be lifelong.
I'll just give you one example. I used to work with this lady in a school in Italy. She was an English woman, actually. And she was always dieting.
Yeah.
And she wasn't grossly overweight or anything. But we used to work on the 3rd floor of this building. And I remember seeing her at the bottom of the building, and there was a sort of running joke, how's your diet going? She's like, yeah, not bad. She was clearly enjoying being on a diet.
Yes.
And I said, do you want to take the stairs? And she's like, no. She looked at me like I had two heads, Because it's that thing of, that's a free weight loss thing. But it's almost, I'm not picking on this lady. But,
well, she doesn't know you. I mean,
that's the thing, I haven't spoken to her since 2012.
There must be a reason for that.
Yeah, it's fine. No, but it's that thing of enjoying being on it, almost like enjoying the process.
Yes, absolutely.
But perhaps not taking other steps.
And it gives her a personality at work. Oh, she's the lady that's on the diet.
Yeah.
And so she defines herself as the lady that's on the diet. And if you do that, you'll always be on a diet.
You're right. We're going to talk about labels as well. It's all going to connect in the end. So the intro of your book starts with, what is this life all about? I'm 70 years old, so this is 10 years ago. And I believe I've finally made sense of it. Were there any major breakthroughs or epiphanies, or is it a gradual thing? Was there anything that you suddenly had a moment of realisation, or is it just a gradual thing?
I think it's a gradual thing because there's about 15 chapters in the book, and each one I sat down to say, what do I think about perfection? What do I think about love? What do I think about, and what do other people think about it? And so each chapter pretty much hangs on itself. Yeah, it's a continuous process. I don't think there was any sort of aha moments, no blindingly, wow, I hadn't realised that. They're just little steps rather than big jumps.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had this, but I just seem to, every now and again, a thought will pop into my head, and it's usually about how incredibly free I am when you look at the whole global world.
Right.
Yeah, we got rules and everything, but so I just get little things like that. It's mostly about and how mental freedom is almost entirely in your own control. I know you'd agree with that.
Of course, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, again, gradual process.
I think there's several ideas which are really useful. One of the foundation ones really is I am not my behaviour. My behaviour is what I do in respect of what is happening to me at the time or the way I see the world. But I am not that behaviour, which means that if the behaviour was bad, it doesn't make you bad. Because that was just, at that time, that was the decision I made, for good or ill, to cope with the situation. And subsequently you can think, yeah, actually, Peter, that was a pretty stupid thing to do. What will I do next time?
So the key is reflection.
The key is reflection on not attaching yourself to your behaviour. I mean, you're obviously responsible for it. You know, if you go around stealing things, you can't just say to the judge, "Oh, well, that wasn't me. That was only."
That was my behaviour.
No, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
You are responsible for your behaviour, but don't make it you.
But yeah, the key is, like I said, being aware of it. I think that cycles, like vicious cycles, such as getting angry in a certain situation, most people would identify with being at work. Just say you work in an office, for argument's sake.
Yeah.
There's going to be things that are going to happen a lot.
Yeah.
Like someone might chomp their crisps too loudly during the night. Just something like that.
Yeah.
And you feel that trigger. And as I said, we'll get to CBT later, but it gets you to stop and say, well, just hang on a minute. Before this cycle just carries on inevitably.
Oh, yes. You see, there's quite a lot of angry people around. I mean, we talk about road rage and trolley rage and things like that. But that person is angry anyway, and all they are is just triggers. It's got nothing to do with driving and nothing to do with trolleys. It's just the circumstances just push your buttons, and that's when your anger comes out. And somewhere in the book I've got some stuff about anger management, which for me is largely a plaster to stick over the wound, as it were. It doesn't cure the wound, unless it's done psychologically and with therapy.
Okay. There's quite a lot of scientific stuff in the book, and I'm so bad on physical sciences, things like physics.
Right.
I'm good on all the behavioural stuff, but it's just a silly question. Why is the sky not necessarily blue? Can you remember that?
Oh, yes. That is a very significant point, actually. I'm really pleased that I did it in the first two chapters.
Page 16, to be precise.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just about reality is what we perceive it to be. Sorry. Go on.
Reality is what we perceive it to be. Yeah. The sky has in itself no colour. It has a wavelength of light which is coming from the sky at that point, such that it interferes in our eyes, and we call it blue. But we create the blue, not the sky. Now, it's easy to see it that way because that is basically only uses one of our senses. When we have two senses coming into effect, it's very difficult to separate what you think is external from what you really realise is internal. Everything happens behind the eyes, not in front of them. We don't take reality into our head through our eyes or through our senses. We create our reality in our heads because of our history, because of our background, because of everything that's happened to us, and what we actually want out of life. You can look at it negatively or you can look at it positively. But we create our reality in our heads, not outside. And that's not an easy thing to get a grip of.
Yeah, I need to have a think about that. Right. And then another thing with the... so we've got our recorder on this table. Obviously, if I smash my fist through this table, it's not going to go well. But the table is made up of atoms, which are, 99% empty space.
Yes.
Can you just explain that for us?
Well, atoms are made of, as far as we know, we have a nucleus and we have electrons floating around, a bit like... If you look at a bicycle wheel that's spinning, it looks as though it's solid because it's spinning so quickly, and you couldn't stick your finger through the spokes. You could try, but not good. Atoms have electrons floating around them, such that it creates basically a ball. They're not in the one plane, such as a bicycle wheel. It's in all of the planes, and so it looks like a shell, like a ball around it. And there's quite a bit about science in there. But that's, in other words, there's no space in there. But it's not solid. We see the table as solid. Of course, we have to. It is solid as far as we're concerned. But if you look at it from an atomic point of view, it isn't.
Are those magic things where someone kung fu, what do you call it, with a finger? Not a kick, but does a kung fu through a table?
Yes.
Is that just fakery or?
No, that can be genuine. Obviously, you've got to know what you're doing, but also somewhere in the book there, I'm talking about the energy, the life energy which is around us. And I was on a course, an NLP course actually, and we were all asked to breathe energy into this one person who was about to smash an 1.5 inch thick deal board with her fist. She was about 4'9" or 5 foot. And I don't think, had we not done that, she could possibly have broken it. But I saw it happen. I was never really into life energy before then, but when something happens in front of your eyes, and it was not in any way a trick, because we were all doing it to some degree, then you have your belief sort of shifted.
Yeah, I was in London, and there was a magician, I think at Trafalgar Square, and obviously, just taking donations. And he did these tricks, and I'm like, obviously it's amazing sleight of hand. You can train yourself for years to have amazing. But he was doing stuff like a card did end up in someone's back pocket.
Yes.
I can't imagine that person had colluded with it.
No.
Imagine he's colluding with
sometimes
people.
They do. Sometimes you see a magician push a watch through the plate glass window.
Yeah, David Blaine did that.
Yeah. Clearly they don't do that because the laws of nature are immutable. You can't change them just because you happen to want to. So the question is, that's very clever. How was it done? Personally, I don't care how it's done. I just know that you're not going to go over the laws of nature. They are fixed. However impossible the trick seems to be. Once it's explained, you think, of course, yes, I get that.
Because a lot of magic is about diverting people's attention.
Yes,
and it's done so brilliantly subtly.
Yeah. But also, we just see the magician as not having set up tricks before. This is, in other words, it's the personality of the magician. You don't realise that behind the scenes there are people setting things up. There are people, it's not what it looks like.
Yeah, it's quite a good metaphor for life, actually, because I think society is, in a way, is set up in a lot of ways that we don't realise.
Yes, that we don't understand.
Because we don't see it behind the scenes.
We're not aware of it.
Very interesting. Right, you've got a couple of lovely quotes. You quote from the best as well, I've noticed.
Do I?
About reality. Here we go, I'm going to read these.
Oh, yeah.
Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. We give the listeners 2 seconds to say who wrote that. Albert Einstein. Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away.
Yes.
I love that. Philip K. Dick. Have you read any of his books?
Yes. He's,
the famous Androids... Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
That's it, yeah. It was all a bit esoteric for me. I've read quite a lot of science fiction, but he was the next layer along, I suppose. Yeah, well, as I've said, we make up reality in our head. What we think is absolutely true isn't necessarily. I'm looking out at the moment at chairs and tables in an eating place. As far as I know, they're real. Certainly if I walk into them, they'll be real. And I think I define somewhere as reality. A thing is real when it takes up space in the world, or it is detectable, like electromagnetic waves are real. And I suppose they take up space in the world. The rest of it is fantasy in our heads.
Yeah. Okay. Don't know where I got this from, actually. If you're in a good mood, things suddenly seem different. Yeah. I want to talk about, you're talking about creating reality. People that are bipolar, for example, Stephen Fry did a program about it. It's actually really good. I'll put it in the show notes. And he was talking about how everyone has mood shifts.
Yeah.
So you wake up in a bad mood. What have I got here? If you're in a good mood, things suddenly look different. And maybe people's idiosyncrasies, let's say, talk about someone in an office again, for example, go from annoying to charming. On a bad day, you take well-meaning jokes badly and ascribe negative meanings to things. So people who are bipolar, obviously, they just have that in extreme measures.
Yes.
So do you think everyone is a little bit bipolar? Do you think it's because we have this word spectrum, which is saying that rather than saying, oh, you're mad and you're not, we're all kind of degrees of mad or degrees of depressed, perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I used to work with a lot of psychologists and counsellors, and it came to me that counsellors see everybody, they know that we're all nuts. The question is to what degree and in how nutty are we, and can they put a label on it? There's far too many PhDs out there these days. If you think of all the people at university who have got to write a PhD to become, to get their qualifications, and they take the whole minutiae of life. And if you start breaking down people, of course, we all have habits of ADHD and we all have habits of this. The question is, does it interfere with our normal way of life? And in that respect, yes, we are on the spectrum, but most of us are somewhere in the middle. It's only extremes on the outside that starts to interfere with their way of life and also with the way of life of people that they interact with.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's even degrees of, say, autism. I mean, I don't know. What's the difference between Asperger's and autism? Is Asperger's a mild form of it?
I don't know.
I've known people with Asperger's, and that seems fairly manageable.
Yes, autistic people have more to do with facts and numbers than they are with feelings and emotions. They make very good researchers, for example.
Because they can focus in.
Because they can focus in, and they have tremendous... I mean, I know someone who has ADHD. She's had it from when she was 15 or 16. Her focus span is amazing. And you can talk to her when she's concentrating on something. She appears not to hear you. And when she's finished doing whatever it was she's doing, she'll then start to answer your questions. So it goes in, she just doesn't process it till she's finished with what she's doing. I didn't realise that, and then I met her, and then I realised this is what she's doing. So don't get angry just because somebody isn't paying attention to you at the time, because they're focusing on something inside their head. Yeah.
I don't want to go off on tangent because we've got so much to cover, but I just rewatched Rain Man, and just to make it clear to the listeners, that's an autistic savant.
Yes.
The vast majority of autists can't do mathematical calculations to 10 decimal points. Anyway, but the guy, I love listening to audio commentaries, on the DVD, and one of them was a writer, and he made this brilliant point. He said that essentially we're all like Raymond Babbitt, but to a smaller extent. So Raymond Babbitt has various defences against the world, and he kind of lives in his head. And he said we all live in our head and we all have defences against the world. So
absolutely.
It's really interesting. But I'm really happy, actually, that in the last few years, this word spectrum has appeared to say, you don't have to say you're mad and you're not, you're depressed and you're not.
No.
Obviously, up to a level, it'd be diagnosable.
Yes, and and then when it starts to interfere in your way of life, then you need to get some, it would be useful if you get some treatment.
Yeah.
But most of us are in and around the centre.
All right. Now, going back to this thing about being in a good mood or a bad mood, here's a question for you. What should you do if you wake up and you're just not feeling good and you have these negative thoughts and they just won't go away? Have you got any techniques? I'll tell you my technique in a minute, but have you got any techniques?
It's a long time since mind you, at 5 o'clock in the morning I certainly have negative thoughts about my health, for example. I'm 81, so I'm thinking not long for this life. I'm 10 years over the 70 years and 10, but usually I get up and make a cup of tea, change the circumstances, change your environment, start to read something to get out of that, because unless you change your environment, it's very difficult to change your state of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep it simple as well.
Yes.
Nice cup of tea, whatever it is.
Yeah, stroke the cat.
Yeah, stroke the cat. There you go. There's this kind of joke on the internet that stroking a cat for 10 minutes is like having 3 months of therapy. My little technique is just for the listeners. don't give the negative thoughts, unless it's about something serious, but I think the vast majority of people's negative thoughts are not actually about serious things. They're just niggles. Don't give them credit or laugh at them, you know. I mean, I laugh at myself on a daily basis, but I laugh at my negative thoughts as well.
Yes.
It's a good way to do it. And also try and coast through the day, you know, surf the wave, to use a cliche.
There's a book somewhere called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The subtitle of which is But Everything is the Small Stuff.
Yeah, almost everything, yeah.
Almost everything is the small stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think this was in your book, but this came into my mind. Humans survived by adapting to circumstances.
Yes, of course.
That's how we have survived.
Yes.
You can use this in your favour. For example, having to learn new things. I found that time is obviously such a strange thing. When you've got to get used to something new, like something changes in your job, again, you've got to sort of ride it out, because it won't be long before you've got used to things. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I agree. If you have something, stress coming up, you know, you've got to do a presentation or something. One of the things I used to tell myself on the train in the way going to work in the morning is, by 5 o'clock tonight, this will all be over.
That's it, yeah, projecting forward, yeah.
So I will do what I can. I've prepared for it. You know, I'm fairly good at doing presentations. It doesn't usually concern me. But by 5 o'clock, it'll all be over. Or by the weekend, it'll all be over. Or by this time next year, whatever. So you project to a time when it'll be finished.
That's it. And it's such a small amount of time that, you know, it'll be over. You're right. Yeah, I've done exactly the same thing, yeah. Driving in a car or sitting in a train and thinking, I'll be on this same train. Well, going the other way, obviously.
But
in
whatever,
2 hours, yeah.
Whatever fear that you might have for what's coming up, when you've got an interview for another job, or with whatever's happening, you know, your boss is really, really annoyed with you, and you don't know what he's going to say, but by 5 o'clock tonight, it'll all be over. It'll be finished, for good or ill.
Yeah. Talking about adapting, on the negative side, when people win the lottery, I think one of the problems is you get used to it really quickly.
Oh, yes.
Like, you see, like, you know, 6 zeros in your bank account the first day, you're thinking, oh my God, this is... Another problem, of course, is that you think it's going to solve all your little niggles.
And it doesn't.
Yeah, but the other thing is because I've seen this, actually, I mean, I've never been a millionaire, but I inherited some money when an uncle died a few years ago. We didn't realise he'd been hoarding lots of money. So I got a few thousand, having never had any money at all. But it was amazing how quickly I got used to it.
Oh, yes.
And all the niggles just started again.
Yeah, one can assimilate the status quo very quickly. I mean, if you are rich in thought, you will always be. If you're poor in thought, you always will be, even if you have money.
Yeah.
Because money does not buy happiness. I mean, if you're lying upside down in the gutter in India, then it's difficult to be happy. But happiness is not brought about by what we have. It's brought about by what we believe about ourselves.
I did a series on a Derren Brown book called Happy. Highly recommend it to your other listeners. It's quite a big book, but Derren Brown writes the way he speaks. It's very accessible, you know. Yes. And he was saying about, they've done loads of tests. If you get up to about, say, 100,000 a year, it's not going to make you fundamentally happier, but it will improve your life. But after about 100 grand, you could argue the number, that's when it doesn't make much difference. And he said, the thing about, I'm financially comfortable. It's not adding something, it's removing the stress of worrying about money.
Indeed.
You know?
Those people that say money isn't the most important thing in the world are generally those with it.
So I think up to a certain point, it's not that it makes you happy, but it
just can take away some of the niggles of life.
Yeah.
You know, you don't like cleaning, so you can afford to get a cleaning lady in to do your work. And you don't like walking so far, so you can afford to buy a taxi. That sort of thing. You know, it gets over the minutiae of problems, difficulties that you might have in your life. But after that, as you rightly say, it isn't going to make... Having 2 million in the bank is no different to having 1 million in the bank.
Yeah, I mean, after a few zeros, I mean, what's the difference? If you got more than you could ever possibly spend, what's the difference? Yeah, I always thought if I was ever rich and famous, the thing I'd like is to have a driver.
Yes.
I'd probably still drive a bit, but for those, traffic jams.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. But of course, when you're in a traffic jam, don't forget that you are the traffic.
Right, you have to explain that one. Oh, you're part of the traffic.
You're part of the traffic.
I see.
You are the traffic.
Yeah, I do get that in my car. Like, I drive to work. I sometimes work on a Sunday, and there's traffic in the morning. I'm like, why the fuck is everyone out in their car? And I'm thinking, actually, that includes me.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, let's go on to a nice, easy topic: time.
Oh, yes.
Nothing complicated about that.
No.
Quote from your book, the major controlling factor in our lives and one we can't do much about. So could you give us some tips maybe on how to manage time, or how should we approach time?
I mean, you can go on time management courses and you can structure your day. When I was at work, I would structure it into 4 segments. Before coffee, after coffee, lunch, before coffee, after coffee. So if you aim yourself to achieve certain things within each of those segments. I was being harassed somewhat horrendously. I massively overworked. Well, I would have been if I did all I was supposed to do. And I actually counted up all the tasks I had to do, all the projects I was looking at, and the length of time that I would realistically spend each week on them, and breaking it down into the 4 per day, 5 days, the 20 segments in the week. I could put 2 to this and I could put 3 to that and so on. Worked out I was supposed to be doing about 80 hours. So I went to my manager and said, give me a set of priorities, because this is not going to happen. Rather than pretending that you can do everything that you're asked to do, I went to my manager and I said, you give me your priorities, because I'm not prepared to work 80 hours a week. So by structuring, by thinking about what you have to do and the length of time it is expected that you're going to have to do it, you can begin to control it.
Yeah. Manageable chunks, I suppose you'd say, wouldn't it?
Yes. The way to eat how to eat an elephant? A bite at a time.
What else would you like to say about time, like from your book? What was your perspective?
My thoughts about time is, because I'm an engineer by trade, as I was anyway, the thing to realise is that there is only now. Whatever it is you plan to do, you will do it when it's now. You can't do something in a fortnight's time. We say that, but we misuse the language. When you do it in a fortnight's time, it will be now when you do it. And now has no past, it has no future. It is now, and this now, and another now, and another now, and another now. So now is the only time we can live. And sometimes we think that we don't realise that we look forward, we spend half our time looking about what we did do, in regret or in joy, whichever, and the half of the other time we spend looking forward to what we're going to do in the future. And the only time you can do anything is now. I walked past the river coming down here this morning, and I think, as I did when I went over London Bridge when I was working there will be a time I will not be doing this. So such a mundane task as walking by the river, enjoy every single one, because time will move on and I won't be doing this for the rest of my life. I don't know how I won't, but I won't.
The counter to that would be, you need to make plans for the future.
You need to make plans for the future.
What's the relationship
But
there?
you don't live in it.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing that people do is they frequently create futures in their head that they don't want. What will happen? If I do this, and if I can't pass this exam, and but that's going to mean that I'm going to have to wait another 6 months before. And they spend a whole half hour trying to cover all the things in the future about which they can do nothing anyway, and they certainly can't do it now. So plan for the future, but don't live in it.
Yeah, it's kind of what Darren Brown says. You need to have good relationships in the present and the future.
Yes.
And obviously the past does play a role. Okay, you're right, it's not actually the past.
No, but it's a very significant role, because it was the past that created us, or that we used to create. It was now when we did it. But we created ourselves from our past experiences, beliefs, and that sort of thing. So the past is very important, but the past doesn't necessarily determine what... If you don't think about it, the past will determine the future. But if you realise that, as I said earlier, that was a silly thing to do, Peter. Okay, I won't do that in future. Don't beat yourself up because that was the other thing that I think is significant is that everybody does the best they can from where they are at the moment in their heads, in their time, in their thoughts, in their fears, everybody does. Nobody sets out in the morning to say, I know, I'm going to make some crap decisions today. No, we don't work like that. And the nice thing about, if you take on that belief, is that you can forgive yourself for doing stupid things in the past that you would never do again. But also you can forgive other people for doing things against you, because that was the best they could do at the time.
Yeah, that's a line in the book, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've said that before.
I think that's very important.
All right.
I mean, it's very Christian, not that I'm a Christian, but it is a very Christian approach. Forgive them for they know not what they do.
Yep. Just talking about time, I've got actually a little tip. I had a day off ages ago, and for the first time ever, I spent the whole day, I didn't look at the clock.
Nope, right.
Ever.
Right.
For the whole day.
Yep.
And I realised that it's actually quite difficult to do that unless you just consciously decide to do that.
Yes.
You start looking at the clock and then you think, let's say for argument's sake, you've got a whole day off, nothing to do, you've got a whole me day, You start thinking, 11 o'clock, do I have a cup of coffee at 11 normally, don't I?
Right. Yes.
1 o'clock, it's lunch, sorry.
Yeah.
3 o'clock, maybe go for a walk, and you suddenly realise how much you're cutting the day off.
That's true, but that's part of the behaviours that we've acquired over our lives. It's very difficult to eat when you're hungry, irrespective of what time of the day it is. Because very often our lives, hopefully, interacting with others, and they eat at lunchtime, so we tend to do the same. But when I was lecturing in college, of course, there you're a victim of time. 9 o'clock I've got to be here teaching the 3A. It's 11:30 I've got to be at something. I've got to be in room LG in order to do whatever. So almost every minute of your time is controlled. The first thing after I resigned or retired from teaching is I basically threw away the watch. I don't care what time it is because in teaching or lecturing you are so hidebound by the time.
Yeah, it is amazingly freeing. Obviously, as you said, your day off might involve other people. But just say for argument's sake it didn't. But I think that's something that we can do. We can control that.
Yes,
you don't
we
have
can
to look at your
control
watch.
it. But
I understand, you're right.
I'm not into doing away with old behaviours. I'm into creating new ones and a choice of which behaviour am I going to do. You'll never lose the tendency to eat at lunchtimes, depending what country you go to and how long you live there, or tea time or coffee in the mornings and so on. That's a pattern of behaviour in the West. It isn't like that in other countries. If you're starving in Africa or wherever, that mode of behaviour, that pattern of structuring your time just doesn't exist. And so it takes a while for us to get out of that pattern and habit. But if we did it every Sunday, I don't care what time I eat, and we build ourselves into a new change of behaviour specifically for that day, then yes, you can do that.
And it doesn't take long to build a habit either.
No, if you
just got to put the dedication at the beginning.
Yes, and if you do it sort of every Sunday for a month, then it becomes, if you choose to do it. Of course, your intentions of doing it may well wane as time passes, but
you create an association.
Yeah.
Now, another thing, this is to do with this kind of, you obviously heard of The Power of Now.
Yes, of course. Yeah, Eckhart Tolle.
That's it. Now, there's a famous philosopher called Michael Caine. You might have heard of him. Actually, I think he's an actor, isn't he? Now, he's written a few memoirs. And the last one was actually a bit like a self-help book, I suppose.
Right, yeah.
And he said, I wake up at whatever it is, 6:30 in the morning, and I go to bed at 11 or whatever it is. He said, in all that waking time, I'm alive to every moment.
Yes.
I'm not letting the moments pass me by.
Right.
They're not all great moments.
No.
You can argue about, Michael Caine is 90 now, so every day's not a holiday.
No, indeed not. And he hasn't got that many more to go. So you enjoy every day, because I don't know how many more I'm having.
Yeah. But I've never forgotten that from reading it. Yeah, no. being alive to the moment. And
yes.
Here's a little thing that the listeners can think about. How many times do we breathe every day?
Yeah.
I did a bit of research. It's about 13,000. People listening to this, and you and me, how many of those breaths do you remember from, say, yesterday?
None.
Probably none.
No.
Obviously, some people do deep breathing. They might remember 10 of them.
Yeah.
But it's amazing, isn't it? It's just... days can pass you by, and you don't have to focus deeply on all the 13,000.
No, you don't. The other thing, of course, is that if you don't have a job, and I don't at the moment, thank God, I retired a long time ago. If you're not careful, there are no structures in the week. I mean, I have a group I go to on Wednesday, and that delineates the week, and I look forward to that group, and then write them in the second half of the week. And it's the weekend, and you go and you always do so your time is structured. You've structured your time in a useful way to you. But when you don't work, those structures go away, and you have to create your own structures, because you need a pattern of behaviour where you know where the hell you are in the week and in time. I mean, now we know where we are in the day because we have an internal clock, but we don't have an internal week. What delineates the week comes in from the outside, and it's useful to have it's a pattern of behaviour, it's a
routine.
It's a routine that you get into, which is great within reason. But if you're not careful, you can get stuck in that routine. You know, it's a very well furnished furrow, and you don't stick your head above the parapet. These are choices which you can take.
We're going back to what we said earlier, so we're trying to find a balance then, because you don't want to get trapped by routine.
No.
But then you're right.
But you do need
You're
routine.
right. When I create time, if I work hard and I create time for a few days off,
yes,
I find it doesn't work for me.
You've got to structure your
Easy
time.
days are good.
Yes.
Easy days are better than blank days for me.
Oh yes. Well, there's no such thing as a blank day. You just haven't filled it. You fill it with something.
Yeah.
Even if it's sitting, by the side of the
Thinking
pool.
what you should be doing, maybe.
Yeah. Damn, I should have done this yesterday. Oh, bugger it, I can't be bothered.
Yeah, I saw a quote. What was it? People spend the free time they've created wondering what they're going to do, or something like that. I can't remember what the quote was.
Yeah. A friend of mine, we were working, this is many, many years ago, he would get up at 6 o'clock on a Saturday, and I would say, good God, you get up at that time when you go to work. Why do you do it on Saturday? I said, I'm not wasting my free time lying in bed. And I thought, that's.
Yeah. On one of the pages, you were talking about an exercise to appreciate the moment.
Yes.
Did that come from that thing that we both went to? What was that place in London called that we went? No, we didn't go together, but we.
I'm not sure. I learned.
They called it the exercise. Sitting on a chair,
Yes,
shutting your eyes and kind
that's
of.
right. And noticing the noise around you.
Yeah.
Don't make anything out of it. Don't give it meaning. Just listen to the noise around you, and then open your eyes and look at the picture in front of you. Don't make it mean anything. Like there's a lady there in a mobilised wheelchair. I could put all sorts of meaning around that.
Yeah, create stories.
Don't. Just accept that that's the way it is. And all of our senses, we can go through those. And that brings now inside.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if we don't understand, if we don't acknowledge and recognise our senses, then we might as well not have them. I mean, the sight is the obvious one, because it's difficult. We use sight all the time. We don't necessarily use hearing all the time. And taste, we don't really notice the taste unless we've just had a cup of coffee that within 5 minutes I'd have forgotten that.
Yeah.
Everything is now. Your sense of taste is now. You can remember a sense of taste, but in order to do that, you have to do it now. Everything happens in now, not in the future and not in the
I was
past.
just thinking, there's a word called mindfulness. Yeah, because I think people realise that because in the West we seem to be so sceptical of things that from the East broadly have been around for thousands of years.
Yes.
So I think they came up with this word mindfulness because meditation might put people off. It's too stereotyped,
Yes.
And in fact, one of the, I'm an English teacher, in one of the English books, there's a listening exercise, which is you shut your eyes and you imagine you're eating some chocolate, but you take every part of it, like unwrapping it, and what does it feel like when, you have to imagine eating chocolate. And the funny thing is, it's not quite as good as eating chocolate, but it does kind of get you halfway. It's weird. You actually do start to almost enjoy the chocolate without the chocolate being there. Yeah, right.
Past, but you brought it into now by your imagination.
Yeah. I used to do an exercise when I lived in Madrid. It was kind of similar to the one we were just talking about. Because I'm kind of very audio, I used to listen to the radio a lot when I was a kid, and obviously I've been a musician, now I'm a podcaster. Yeah, I used to do a thing where I shut my eyes, and because it's Madrid Metro, it's obviously quite busy, and it's so fantastic. It just took 5 minutes.
Yes.
Shut my eyes, and I just kind of noticed and counted all the sounds around me. So conversation here, left, conversation on the right, the sound of the train obviously moving, and then as it pulled into a station, you can feel it slowing down.
Getting out of the tunnel makes a different sound when there's a platform there to what it's like inside.
Yeah, you get the announcement, Próxima Estación, people coming out, and I was imagining, I wonder how many people have just gone out and how many are coming in. New conversations start, and it's such a good exercise, and it's just 5 minutes.
We don't spend enough time with our feelings, our senses,
as in sensations.
sensations. We only remember that which is significant to us at the time, because the unconscious mind deletes all the ones that aren't.
Yeah, but if you take away all the kind of stereotyping about meditation and sitting in the lotus position, it's incredibly simple.
Yes, it is.
5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, but that wouldn't pay anybody to teach you to do it, you see.
Yeah, right. You can do a sort of version of it. I would say proper meditation, to get the full benefit, you probably need to do either a mantra or breathing. But what we're talking about, that was it. It was the School of Economic Science.
That's right.
In London.
Yes.
We didn't go together, as I said, but years later.
You've been as well as I have.
Yeah, they called it the exercise, and it's so simple, and it's not difficult. That's the point.
And when it's about to hit the fan when you're at work, it's good to sit down and just take in all of the, one at a time, the senses, and get to now clear the mind of all the other cluttery things.
And deep breaths as well while you're doing it.
Yeah, it's useful.
Yeah. Right, we're going to talk about NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming.
Okay.
Could you give us the short version of what it is?
Neuro-Linguistic Programming is the way in which our senses give us messages about the world and how the brain copes with those, what it does with those messages. For example, generally, it will delete, distort, or generalize everything that happens to us. And we have to do that. As soon as you see somebody, you immediately put them you generalize, oh, he's a male, therefore he must, whatever. Because there's so many messages coming in that we can't cope with them all, and the unconscious mind will delete the ones that it thinks you're not interested in. Because in NLP we've got the body, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and I've thrown in the higher self, but you don't need that in NLP. So it's a question of how does the body send messages to the conscious mind and to the unconscious mind, and then the messages from the unconscious mind to the conscious mind. Which is why hypnotism is so important, because it gets rid of the conscious mind and has you realise what you really believe as to what you would like to believe or say you believe. And so that's the end. Neuro is what we do with the messages coming in. Linguistic is how we describe them to others and how we describe them to ourselves. And in the book I've got an example of the mother says about her son, oh, he's stupid, which isn't a really very useful way. If she were to think, well, he doesn't do anything, he's lazy, maybe he's unmotivated. If we change that lazy to unmotivated, which he is if he's lazy, then it's her job and the rest of the world's job to motivate him, not just to stick him in a box and say he's lazy. So it's what we do with the words. After a while, you listen very carefully to the way people describe things, because that's the way they see it in their heads.
So is it typically used to reframe things? Is that how people use it? Would salesmen use it, for example, to gain rapport?
Yes. And NLP is a tool, and you can use it for good or ill.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yes, it is very much. It's quite used in business. I think it's really getting to the real reality of what we do with it and how we interpret it and the way in which we describe it to others. And of course there's trick expressions, trick words and so on. And the programming is our behaviours that we've learnt over a period of time, some of which are essential, some of which are unnecessary, some of which don't work. A fascinating study if you get into it. And it certainly changed my view of the world over a period of time, probably over about 10 years, completely. I used to do self-pity. I was really, really very good at it. And I thought, at that time, I remember thinking, I'm worth more than this. And I came across NLP, and over a period, and a couple of courses, it totally transformed my way of the world.
Wow. Imagine it's used in sport quite a bit, isn't it?
Well, motivational speaking, of course.
Oh, yeah.
One thing about NLP which I loved, the sentence which I loved, is the guy said, I'm not looking for the truth, I'm looking for what works. Because you can argue what's true till you're blue in the face. The question is, does this behaviour work? I.e., does it give you and the person you're talking with or behaving with, does it give them what they're looking for? It doesn't matter whether it's true or not, within reason.
And the book is Frogs into Princes. Would that be the best starter kit?
I would say is that Bandler or Grinder? I can't remember which.
I think it's both of them, isn't it?
It could be both.
Well, they were the two who started it, wasn't it?
Yes, Bandler and Grinder, about the early 70s.
Yeah, something like that. That's the most famous book, anyway.
Yes, it's one of the original classics. And NLP has moved a lot since it was first created.
Yeah, you were talking in the book about the conscious mind, the unconscious mind.
Yes.
If you take a situation people's kind of inner drives will kick in a certain situation, for good or bad. Can you train your unconscious mind? Can you train it so in a certain situation your instinct will be different?
Yes.
Or is that by changing core beliefs? I don't know. Or is
Yes,
it
exactly. In the end, your unconscious mind holds your beliefs. Generally, people don't know what they believe. You only know what you believe if you start asking yourself questions. Why did I do that? What caused me to do that? Why on earth would I think that so and so and so and so? If you start to examine it, the unexamined life is not worth living, as some ancient philosopher said.
Socrates.
And if you analyse what it is you do, your unconscious mind can... The unconscious mind is always thinking its first priority is to protect you. And so it drops back. There's a big difference between react and respond. We tend to use those two words, again, linguistically in NLP, we tend to use those two words as though they were the same. React is we react, i.e. we do things in response the way we have always done it. It's a reaction.
Yeah. Doing it again, obviously.
Response is saying, hang on a minute, what's the best way to handle this? Most angry people react. They lashed out and bopped their sister on the head when they were young, and they still do, figuratively speaking, the same thing today. That's a reaction. Whereas if you think and aim to respond, you're more likely to come out with a better behaviour, or a behaviour which serves you and probably somebody else as well.
Yeah, well, that's where the CBT, as I say, comes in. It's that space, it's that gap that most people don't fill with. Think about it just before you do it.
That's right.
I mean, people say count to 10, so it's obviously it's in our culture, isn't it?
It's the same idea.
I never thought about that. React, literally means act again. People have far more choices than they realise they have. Go on, elaborate on that. Can you just give us an example? Maybe?
Well, I remember on the train I used to commute, and I'd be with the same group most mornings, and they were bitching and whinging about the fact that they had to go to London to work. And, this is so unfair, the trains, it was leaking in through the doors, and this was not a pleasant experience, and it takes me an hour and a half to get to work, daddy, And I said, but you're choosing to do that. And I said, well, why don't you work locally? Well, I can't get the money. Okay, so you'd sooner work in London to get the money than you would be to work locally. Well, I've got to, because I said, hang on, you've got a house in the country, that's very expensive. You've got your kids going to private school, that's very expensive. Yeah, but that means if I didn't do that, I'd have to change my life. Yes, that's a choice you have. Well, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so you're choosing to work in London. In other words, people are living the life they choose. Nobody's forcing them to do what it is they don't want. Well, unless they're in trouble with the law, nobody's forcing them to do something they don't want to do. People don't realise they are choosing everything they do. And because you've got into a pattern and a behaviour, and maybe they had to do it when they were little because their mother told them to, they don't have to do it now. You just got to look at, if I don't do this, what will happen? Therefore, I'll choose to do this.
Right.
Everything is a choice, which most people don't get, which allows them to be grumpy and miserable and bitch and whinge because the world isn't the way they want it to be. The world is exactly the way they want it to be because they're choosing it.
You're saying literally there's always a choice?
There's always a choice.
Right, okay.
The alternatives may not be acceptable because you're going to lose this, you're going to lose that. It's a sort of, would I sooner work in London 12 hours a day and have the lifestyle I have outside of that? Or do I want to start a small holding in Sussex and live differently? And some people do.
Yeah, I think it's the change part that would be the scary part.
Well, of course it's scary, but it's much easier to bitch and whinge and complain than it is to actually realise you've got a choice and do something about it. Some people do make
it's more fun to bitch, though.
Oh yeah, that's right. It doesn't cost them anything, and they don't have to change their lifestyle.
End of part 1.